All right. How's everyone doing today? Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me here today. We are almost halfway through reInvent 2018. Hope it's been a great show for you so far. So I wanted to talk to you today about security and applications. It's no secret that organizations of all sizes, they are all migrating to cloud and adopting cloud in a big way. And one of the challenges many of our customers tell us they face is about going to the cloud, but doing it in a secure manner. It seems that security sometimes becomes an impediment, and they would rather move at the speed of the business, and they would rather have security move at the speed of business as well. So how do you go about doing this thing? Move to the cloud, adopt the cloud, but do it in a secure manner and be at peace so that you're not going to slow down your entire business. And that's what Illumio does, and that's what Illumio helps you achieve. So with that, we're going to get straight into it. My name is Faraz Aladin. I'm part of Illumio, and hopefully over the course of next 20 minutes, I'll be able to give you a very good idea of what Illumio does and what it can do for you. Everything that we're going to talk about here today, you can see all of this stuff in action live and not very far from here. Right behind you in that bright orange colored booth says Illumio. Hard to miss. If you just turn your head around, you will see our booth, and everything over here that you are going to be seeing is available over there to see in action live. So just think of this as something that you see here and you get the demo over there. All right, so with that, let's quickly get started. Here's the agenda we'll be covering over here today. First, talk about security in a cloud-first environment. Everybody knows that every organization of any size and shape, they are actually looking at cloud as a means of doing business. So we'll talk about how do you deal with security in a cloud-first environment. Second, application visibility and dependency mapping. This is a key. This is a very important step that organizations need to take if they want to secure their environment. Next, we'll talk about micro-segmentation, what the heck it is and why is it important, why should anybody care. And then we'll talk about some of the customer use cases, how customers use micro-segmentation, and specifically the solution from Illumio. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes left for some Q&A. If we don't have time for Q&A, I'll be there at the Illumio booth as well, so please come and see me, and we'll be hopefully be able to answer any questions you might have. So let's get on with it. You know, life was very simple in the past when data centers looked something like on the left. Here's how most enterprises looked like. It was in one single location. Maybe you had multiple locations, but at the same time, it was all neatly there, and you knew exactly what was going on and what was what. But over the last course of 5+ years, as organizations have started to migrate to cloud, we're starting to see some very interesting things. Because today's environment is very dynamic, distributed, and homogeneous. No, it's heterogeneous, right? Trying to make sure. All right, so the way it plays out that when people move towards cloud, they get lots of benefits, lots of things that they're able to get. But it also comes with some of the challenges. And some of the challenges that we hear from our customers, they actually tell us that the number one challenge that they see is today everybody wants to run anything anywhere. What does that mean? Well, I can have my applications on bare metal, on virtual machines, containerized hosts. I want them to be able to run in the cloud, maybe multiples of them. I also have a presence of the application stack on my on-prem. I want all of this thing to work together. So really, I have my applications on anything, anywhere. And that's really how they view this, which is a problem for them because when you move to the cloud, how do you get your arms around this whole thing in terms of security? Second, what they tell us is also speed, agility. Going to the cloud, one of the biggest reasons is about agility. So they can actually roll out services and applications faster. But it seems like if you have to worry about security, that slows you down. So that's kind of counterproductive. What they really want is to be able to move to the cloud, but they want security to come at the same speed of the business so they can get there. And last but not the least, now that you have your applications in all kinds of environments, you have increased your attack surface tremendously. Because now, when you have a breach, there is going to be challenges because you have an attack surface that's not nicely contained in one place, it's all over the place. So how do you secure such an environment? And this is where micro-segmentation comes into play. And micro-segmentation over the last couple of years has evolved as probably one of the most strategic tools in the toolkit and a very effective one at that. So people ask then, what the heck is this micro-segmentation? Well, let's talk about it, right? Let me use this analogy, which I think is probably very effective in understanding it. If you had to get on a submarine, which submarine would you get on? The one on the left or the one on the right? Well, let me tell you something about the submarines. The one on the left has one nice big thick hull, lots of room. You can move around. The one on the right, it's been compartmentalized, it's been segmented, not easy to move around. Well, guess what happens when you have a breach and there's a break and the submarine starts to take in water? When that happens, you're going to find, all right, if I can get some of this animation done right, it will be helpful. So when there is a breach and it starts to take water in, the submarine on the left-hand side has a good chance of sinking. But the one on the right-hand side will probably stay up. And the reason for that is, even though it took in water, the water was localized into that small compartment. You're not going to see the bad effects of that throughout the submarine. That's exactly what micro-segmentation is all about. Take that concept, apply it to your data center. You have a full-on L2 connectivity in your environment, wherever you are. If you do have a breach, somebody gets past the firewall, they're not going to be able to now move freely around. You want to break that attack surface up. That's what micro-segmentation is all about. And that's what Illumio helps you to do, and do it in a very easy and scalable manner. For those of you who may have not seen this in action, let's talk a little bit about how Illumio does it. So Illumio's architecture is very straightforward. It's a software platform. Our adaptive security platform actually has two main architectural components. The two components are, the first one is this small piece of software, which is an agent, virtual enforcement node, that sits on every workload that you want to protect. And these workloads could be anywhere. They could be on-prem, they could be in cloud, they could be bare metal, they could be virtual machines, containerized hosts. We don't care, we don't mind. What it does, it actually collects a lot of intimate information about the workload. The IP address, the open ports, what applications it's running, what applications it's talking to in other workloads, on what port numbers, who's talking to this particular workload. Once it has all of this, it actually transmits this context and telemetry-rich data to the second piece of our architecture, which is the policy compute engine. This policy compute engine actually takes all of this information and does two very important things. First, it actually draws an application dependency map. I'm going to show you that live in action, and you'll be able to see all the details. So that's your first starting point. Now you're able to see how applications are communicating with each other. That sets you up for defining the security and authoring security policies. This is the second part of the policy compute engine. What it does is it allows you to construct the security policies in a very natural language. You don't have to go to a firewall university and learn all the layer 3 and layer 4 stuff and what port is on what protocol, what service, etc. You just specify, I want, say, this particular web layer to be able to talk to my processing layer. Or I want all the workloads in development side to not be able to reach the production side. All you do is simplify and put it in the natural language. Policy compute engine does all the heavy lifting and calculates those precise layer 3 and layer 4 rules, which are then passed on back down to these agents. The agent programs them into the firewall in the OS that you already possess. You always had all those enforcement points you needed. You just never had a good way of activating them or orchestrating them at scale. So if you are in Windows environment, that's Windows filtering platform. If it's Linux, it's IP tables. Similar mechanisms are there for AIX, Solarix, etc. So this enforcement agent, or what we call this agent, is actually not cracking any packets, taking them out of the kernel, introducing any performance challenges or anything like that. It actually programs the host firewall that you already possess. It is also tamper-proof, so if somebody tried to wipe off the layer 3, layer 4 rules that we had put, it will put them back again. If the hacker is smarter and says, I'm just going to kill this agent, kill this process in the OS, the policy compute engine, the brain knows about it. After 3 missed heartbeats, it will quarantine this part and change the policies on the outbound side on the other workloads, so you're not compromising your security. And the attacker, even if they do land on an asset, they're stranded on that asset. Something else interesting we do, and by the way, all of this is, again, as I mentioned earlier, live in action. You can see this live. We also do something interesting. We actually take in information from vulnerability scan systems, like example Qualys or Tennis or Rapid7, and we overlay that on top of the application dependency map. This helps you actually view your environment and ascertain what kind of risk do you have in your environment. relating to the applications. And I'll show you a little bit more detail as we go forward. But essentially, this is the architecture of Illumio. The solution, as I said, is software-based. You can consume it as a SaaS. You can host it on-prem. You can host it in a VPC in AWS. We have total flexibility for you to do that. So now that you understand how Illumio does it, let's start talking about what are some of the key things it gives you. First and foremost, as I said, it's the application dependency map. This is really key for organizations. Many of our customers, and there are customers of Illumio, we share their names publicly, Salesforce, Morgan Stanley, Oracle, Workday. These are all people who actually have done it for not 1, 2, 10, 100,000, tens of thousands of workloads. And all of these customers, they share their insights with us. The number one thing, their starting point has always been this application dependency map. Because what you can't see, you can't protect. You have to be able to see, and not at the network layer, but at the application layer. Because applications talk to each other, they also talk among the different layers. No application lives on an island. They actually have to talk to each other to be able to conduct business. This actually tells you now that my ordering application, the web tier, is talking over here. Or maybe this particular communication should not be happening. Maybe that's why it's red. So the idea is this is your starting point to understand what is going to be my security posture. How do I secure myself? So really it comes down to is, why is visibility important? Because it does three key things for you. Number one, it eliminates blind spots. Because if you're not able to see some communication paths between applications, you might end up writing a policy, or in the older days, you might end up doing a firewall rule, which goes into enforcement right away, and you start getting calls from your application owners. What did you do? Why did you break my application? So by way of looking at the application dependency map, you will eliminate blind spots. Number two, it actually is going to improve your policy creation, because now you're going to see paths of communication that you probably either didn't know. You probably didn't know that your asset management application talks to your ordering application. The application owner had no idea, and they never made arrangements so that this path is open. So now you are going to be able to improve your policy creation and attain a better security posture by way of this application dependency map. And last but not the least, if you are running applications that are under regulatory compliance, you actually have to be able to show to the auditor via application mapping that, look, I have secured this application, and there is no path this application is talking into anything else in my network. By the way, the compliance part, it's not only important that you protect yourself and put the necessary controls. For example, in financial services, if you're a banking environment and you're running Swift and application, not only do you have to segment it out from the rest of the network, you actually have to prove it that you have done it to the auditors, because if you can't prove it, you might as not have done it. And this application dependency map that provides you the visibility can actually tell the auditor, look, here's my Swift application. The only thing that's allowed to talk to it is from the Swift net. Nobody else can talk into it. And they're not looking at IP addresses, port numbers. They're looking at label-based things so they can human readable say, yes, this makes sense. So that's really the power of application dependency mapping. It also helps you, as I said, in creating security policies. This is a little bit of an eye chart, but the point is not to look at all the different text in there. You can see all of this in action. But I wanted to point out to you is that once you have that map, it is going to allow you to create as granular a policy as you want. Many of our customers, they start with just very coarse-grained segmentation. They will take a app or a set of apps, ring-fence it, like the Swift application or ordering application, and say, all the workloads within this application, they can talk to each other. This is what the policy says. Web processing, database, they can all talk to each other, all services across all ports. That's the first step they take to secure that application. It's a little coarse-grained, but it does the trick for them to get started. Next, they may actually fine-tune, and they say, you know what, I'm going to actually lock down the different tiers. I'm going to go by tiers and say, my web tier can talk to web tier on this port. My application processing tier can talk across these different ports, and all these services are supported. Or you can down one more level granular and say, I'm going to lock it down to specific processes and services. I'm going to go and say my databases are allowed to talk to each other, but they can only talk on this port number using TCP and only using Redis as a service as an example. Nothing else is going to be allowed. And since we are a whitelist model, that's the only path that's going to be allowed. Everything else is going to be blocked. Now, if you're wondering, where do I get all this TCP and port numbers and everything? You are not. You're not doing any of this. All you are telling is the policy compute engine, my database layer can talk to database layer, and I only want it for this service. The rest of the heavy lifting is done by policy compute engine to calculate all those precise rules and put it into the workload OS firewall. So you're not doing any of this heavy lifting, but this is the kind of granular segmentation you can provide. So what does it do for you? It actually allows you to securely move to public cloud. And we have a demonstration of this we can show you. If you have an environment where you are spinning up new applications and opening it up straight in the public cloud, in AWS environment, you can actually pre-write the policy and associate it with that. And when you fire off the instances, EC2 instances, as they come up secured. So that means at birth, that application, when it came up in the cloud, it came up secured. And that's really what organizations want, because typically what would happen is they would want to bring up that application, and there's a period of time, whether it's a few days or a few weeks, during which they figure out how to secure this application, and that's not what is moving at the speed of business. They do not want that security piece to be an impediment. They actually want to make sure our customers that they can bring these applications live in the cloud for the first time with security in place. There is no window of opportunity for a bad actor to actually harm you in that case. So that's really the big advantage. It allows you to move securely to the cloud and adopt the cloud. Something else, as I mentioned earlier, we take in vulnerability-based information and put it on top of the application dependency map, and it actually opens up a world of information. It actually now quantifies risk for you and tells you that how much east-west vulnerability I have in my environment. This particular chart shows you that there is communication pathways between different ports, vulnerable ports. Yesterday was Tuesday. Microsoft released a whole bunch of information, Patch Tuesday, the vulnerabilities. Many of you do not have the ability to patch right away for a variety of reasons. For one being you are at AWS, but more importantly, sometimes you may not have a patch, or maybe it's under production freeze, or maybe the patch has not been tested, it might break something else. So if you're not patching right away, you can use micro-segmentation as a form of compensating control and reduce the risk in your environment, which basically means you're going to constrain the number of flows that can actually come into that workload or eliminate some altogether. Because when we quantify this score, if you read this 540, what it means is this particular workload has the ability to be talked to by 546 other workloads on that vulnerable port. Now, do all those 546 workloads or EC2 instances need to talk to this? Maybe not all of them. And that's what we help you do. By way of micro-segmentation, we can constrain those paths, block some of those paths, and reduce the score and bring it down to a manageable number without doing any patching. This is not to say you shouldn't patch. You absolutely should patch. But if you cannot patch right away, you can use micro-segmentation as a compensating control. We provide you this view so that you can actually view the risk in your environment. Rather than going by vulnerabilities, you actually see risk. And you're also able to see your environment like an attacker does. Because increasingly, what do we think? If there are critical vulnerabilities over here, which is on the databases, my first instinct is to go and close off that vulnerability. Guess what? The bad actors have caught onto it, and they are increasingly weaponizing low and medium vulnerabilities because they know you're going to go and in crunch of time close off the critical ones but may leave medium and lows open. So they are increasingly weaponizing those vulnerabilities. And also, actually, this is one way of making sure that you have a patching priority. A lot of times customers ask us, I have 1,000 workloads, where do I start? This actually gives you a very good idea because now you can see from an application standpoint which applications are more vulnerable or risky, and are those my crown jewel applications. So with that, let me quickly end up with, this is a little bit more details. It even tells you what vulnerabilities you are closing off. I showed you the micro-segmentation from coarse to fine-grained. We now actually provide you another mechanism where you can use this slider to actually slide. Do you want to close off critical, high, medium, low, or which vulnerabilities? And accordingly, your policies will change, and you will be able to see which vulnerabilities you are mitigating. So how do customers use our solution? Well, in a variety of ways. Actually, many of them start just by mapping application dependencies so that they can understand what's in my environment. Sometimes it is the first step you take when you're moving to the cloud. CEO comes and says, hey, we're going to move to the public cloud. And the CIO says, that's great, but I really need to know which applications am I going to be moving, and are there going to be any performance issues? If I just move the web tier of an application, keep the processing here, is there going to be an impact? So those are the kind of things application dependency map tells you. We talked about vulnerability maps, how you can marry this with the vulnerability data to show you risk in your environment. Many of our customers, as I mentioned, they start with coarse-grained micro-segmentation, ring fencing, and then they fine-tune it to bring it down to a tier or down even to a process. And then people use it also for environmental separation, separating it out development, production, testing, etc. And last but not the least, we can actually even tie Active Directory information so that only certain groups are allowed to use application. If you had a finance application, only members of the finance group are allowed to access it. If I try to access it, if I'm not a member of finance group in AD, I won't be allowed to use it. So there's a variety of ways that we help our customers. These are all typical use cases, some form or flavor of this, that customers are able to use our products and solutions for. So with that, I'm going to open it up for Q&A and see if you have any questions that I can answer in the next few minutes that I have, or actually a few seconds. But more importantly, the orange booth, you can't miss that sign. I encourage everyone to stop by over there and see all of these things in action. And if you have any questions, get hold of anybody in the orange t-shirts. Thank you for sharing your time with us over here, and hopefully you'll have a great time at reInvent 2018.